All right, hello. This is Dr. Michael Wasson, per usual, on the Down Fracture podcast, a podcast for talking jaws. As always, I'm here with my counterpart, Dr. Sam Bobek. Sam, how are you?
Oh man, I'm doing great. It's a couple days before Christmas, so we're getting in a recording session just prior to the holiday. So it's good.
Nice, nice, nice. Uh, Basic housekeeping as always. We do have the email downfracturepodcast@gmail.com. If there's cases or topics you would like to discuss, feel free to shoot us an email. Again, patient protected information is your responsibility, but anything you want to shoot our way, we'll take a look at. Otherwise, we have a very interesting topic and a very interesting guest today. Sam, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, so our topic today is about doing a fellowship in orthognathic surgery. We have Marcus here. Marcus is a fifth year resident at Oregon Health Science University. I got introduced to Marcus many years ago, actually. I don't even know how long ago it was. Might have been 7. I feel like that's about right. He was a resident at, I'm sorry, he was a dental student at the University of Washington, and he knew that he wanted to go into oral surgery seemingly early on, and he was quite motivated and eager to um, go to the OR and meet various different surgeons. And so I've kept in touch with him over the years. He's a great guy. He's a good person to talk to, and I don't know, kind of give us a pulse on how it is as a resident nowadays, because Wasson and I have been out of residency for a little bit. So Marcus, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think Dr. Oda in the past introduced us.
Yeah, I don't know. Is she still practicing?
No, she's not. No.
Oh, okay. She was great. Yeah, so Marcus, you're on paternity leave. So you're taking a little bit of time away from your first kid. And tell us about residency. You're in fifth year, right?
Yeah, no, residency is great. I mean, I think at OHSU, we each year you just have more responsibility, but also you have more freedom, which is nice. And so you offer the autonomy to operate and oftentimes choose the cases that interest you, and that's been very helpful. Just entering my fifth year and then now it's soon to be chief year. I think that's been really nice.
And you've been flirting with the idea of fellowship.
Yeah, flirting it with it for quite some time.
Okay.
Yeah, it might lead to an end or it might lead to a actual
Have you
relationship. I don't know.
because fifth year, is when you start thinking about what you're going to be doing once you're done. And thinking about fellowship, have you done interviews already?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So you've done legwork, kind of find the spots you want to go, and you're going to do it, or you're still on the fence.
Well, here's actually the interesting journey I've had with fellowship. So my initial pull to oral surgery was to do head and neck. And so for sure I was going to do a fellowship at that point. And then I reevaluated myself as I entered residency and really pondered on what I want from life. And then I changed my goals to then pursue cosmetic surgery, actually. I really enjoyed cosmetics. I liked fine details. And then that actually changed. And I then landed to jaw surgery. And that's where I'm at right now of considering a jaw surgery fellowship for the past now year. But then the closer I get to graduation, I'm more on the side of not pursuing a fellowship. So this might be a nice turn for the podcast episode.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think this is an interesting one in orthognathics. I don't know if people know this that are listeners, but in oral surgery world or oral and maxillofacial surgery, there's only a few recognized fellowships: head and neck surgery, trauma, actually, cosmetics, and cleft and craniofacial. So those are, I believe, still the 4 recognized classifications. Is that up to date info, Marcus?
That's what I understand too. I think cosmetics was the most recent one that was added.
And so orthognathic surgery and TMJ surgery have kind of lumped together. Those fellowships kind of started probably about 15 years ago, I feel like. And it was the idea to supplement further education following residency. And it seems like as years gone on, orthognathic surgery interest in orthognathic surgery fellowships has increased. Um, and I have a different life history than Wasson does on this, so we're probably good people to talk to. So Wasson, what's your story in terms of training and stuff and fellowship?
Yeah, I would agree with you in the context of you and I for this topic probably can provide a pretty unique perspective in that we both went different directions to kind of end up in similar spots. For me, as similar to where you are, except I was in a 4-year program. My 3rd year, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I rotated through Oregon, and I had great mentors there with Dirks and Bell and Sam and some other people. And, I was kind of pondering the same thing you are. I was thinking of the academic route, the fellowship route, even considering going to medical school and other things. Ultimately, decided not to do it. I applied to one fellowship and then I got offered another. So I had 2 fellowships that I was basically could have gone to. Ultimately decided I didn't want to do it. One was a trauma fellowship that was just offered to me due to my knowledge of these people. And then one was a just kind of general fellowship. But the reasons I wanted to do it was more for the TMJ and cosmetic experience that I didn't get very much of during residency. So my path, eventually I decided not to do those things and started practice. And then I really enjoyed orthognathic and TMJ surgery. I felt like I had the foundation in orthognathics because UW at the time, and I'm less familiar with their numbers now, but we got exposed to a lot of orthognathic surgery, to where I felt confident doing the physical operation. As you get out and you get experience and you look back, I would say there's some nuance, there's some details, and with VSP and other things, there's certainly things that I have learned over the years, but I felt comfortable doing the surgery itself. Like I knew how to dissect and make an incision and make cuts and fixate, all these things. So I felt comfortable with the operation, and I felt like I could learn the other aspects, reading and talking to other people. But I had the exact kind of opposite experience with TMJ. Is my TMJ exposure was not all that great during residency, but I always enjoyed it. I felt it was underserved. I felt there was a need. I found it interesting. And so I had to learn a lot of that on my own time. Like I felt comfortable accessing things. We did a fair amount of head and neck. We would access things for fractures and whatnot. So surgically accessing things I felt comfortable with, but I didn't get a lot of reps in joint replacement and open TMJ surgery. I maybe did a handful of scopes, did a fair amount of arthrocentesis. So immediately after residency, I had to spend a lot of my time, energy, and effort getting up to speed on modern TMJ surgery is what I viewed it as. And I don't feel like you can really have a TMJ practice in this day and age without the ability to perform arthroscopy in a reasonable fashion. That's my opinion, my personal belief. So I really had to learn that. And so I had to take courses to get proficient at that.
Because Wasson, you did a mini residency, yeah?
I did the TMJ mini residency, yes.
Yeah, so that's do you know of these things, Marcus?
Yep, I know this one. Yep.
After you get
four
done,
weekends. I think they may have changed the format, but very good course. Couldn't recommend it enough for people who are in that circumstance. So yeah, that's kind of been my journeys. I did orthognathics and TMJ from the beginning, but my limitations early on for TMJ were basically I was doing a lot of arthrocentesis and then open surgery. Whereas that's kind of the opposite of what I do now.
And
the
Wasson
limitation was tools in the toolkit.
And Wasson, your story, because everyone may not know, but you got out of residency and then went into private practice, yeah?
Yep.
Dentalveolar cases at the
probably-
hospital, kind of mixed practice.
Yeah, probably 75%-ish teeth of titanium, and then doing, I was probably doing in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 cases a year in the hospital with a mix of TMJ and orthognathic.
He did that for like a half dozen years and then went off to kind of focus more on the orthognathic and everything.
Yeah,
right?
moved to Arizona, and there wasn't a lot of what I viewed as a lot of orthognathic and TMJ surgeons or surgery happening down here. I feel like there's a few around here that do it, but Sam, where we come from in Seattle, there was at least 5 of us probably doing close to 40 cases a year, and you and some others doing hundreds. And then came down here and it seemed like the people doing the most were maybe doing around 20 and at most 30 cases a year. and very little TMJ surgery.
Yeah.
Don't know that surgical arthroscopy and other things would happen. So I kind of was like, I like these things and there's a need. So then open this practice that's kind of exclusive to those things.
Yeah, Marcus, how do you see yourself in like 5 years? What do you think you're doing in terms of practice? Do you have any idea?
I thought long and hard about this, and I do enjoy the whole hybrid practice model, and I always think about it how I can achieve that without doing a fellowship, especially in a saturated area where I'm from, where I'm at. I always think about the three things I always look for in a career is product, market, and fit. And I always think about, well, what product can I serve or when I provide, which is, jaw surgery, dental velar. Think about the market. I think about the market that I'm in, which is pretty saturated. And then do I fit in that area? And so, I mean, I want a hybrid practice, but I don't know how to get there. I'm always thinking about ways. And the fellowship thing is hard for me to decide on because I think about opportunity cost quite a bit. I'm biased to think about that. My wife owns two businesses, and so the lessons that she has learned from running a business is like that in itself is a fellowship. And I'm sure you guys both can attest to that. Running a business is a whole other skill. And when I think about fellowship, it's like, well, does that fellowship provide me one, the surgical experience, the critical thinking to treatment plan, and also learning how to be a business owner or practice owner?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you should just retire and get money from your sugar mama. Uh,
I've considered that option, and my wife is just
yeah, no, I
she's
mean, in
waiting for
terms of
me.
opportunity cost, I think the other part of it is the fact of how much school you've already been into, right? Because you go to a
Mhm.
6-year residency program after you've done 4 years of dental school, after 4 years of college, right? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
you're looking pretty old, Marcus. I was just going to say what I think Wasson was thinking. What are you like, 30? You're 29?
Close, 31.
31. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's a real concern because, residents have a ton of debt as well. I mean, it's an expensive thing, medical school and dental school. And so I hear what you're saying.
No, unfortunately, at OHSU, we get free medical school, so that's off our plate, and so that's been
That's huge.
helpful. But even despite that, I always think about, man, a fellowship is 1 year, which is not that long, but it's another year of deferring student loans or not supporting your family. In addition to that, it might require you to move. Um, it takes you away. I always think about, that 1 year, it could take me away from building a referral base, networking with people around me, building a relationship with banks. I mean, these are the thoughts I
Yeah.
have.
Sure. Yeah.
I think
I'm
you're
going
in
to
the
put a
right
plug
place.
in. Oh, go ahead, Wasson. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think your head's in the right place. These are a lot of things that I was gonna bring up to you. And I think the other thing you have to think about is retirement. And you're kind of beating around that, but it's an important thing. And the reality is deferring your income a year might actually be the result of that might actually be 3 or 4 years in retirement age. I don't think it's a 1-to-1 there. And I don't think you want to ignore that either. I don't think you should ignore that. Now, are you still going to be able to retire comfortably in our profession? Yeah. But compounding interest is real. When you start getting up to your retirement age, if you're, let's just throw out numbers, you're getting a 10% return year over year. Once you get that number high enough, that 10% is a huge number. So by every year that you delay that, that's substantial. Let's throw out numbers. You have 3 million in retirement. Well, that's 300,000 you're getting at 10%. The longer you defer getting that kind of return is not nothing. And so 1 year, that you're deferring that is substantial when it starts coming to retirement. Moving your family is not nothing. Um, the other issue that I think has to be said, and Sam, I'm interested in your thoughts on this because I know we both know numerous people who did 7, 8 years of training, and they're not even doing those things. Like our profession is littered with people fellowship trained who are no longer even doing those things. And so you got to be reasonably confident that after you do it, you're gonna do it. I mean, there are people head and neck trained who are at Gentle Dental and other corporate places just taking out teeth or in private practice. doing teeth. Um, you can't predict the future, but if you're going to take a year or more of your life, you got to be fairly, I think, either very inquisitive and, hey, I just want to learn this, and I like learning it has value to me. I just want to do that for my own experience, and I will see personal gain from that. Where you got to be pretty confident you're going to be doing these things, because there's not a ton of us doing orthognathics. There's not a ton of us doing TMJ. Not a ton of us doing cleft.
Yeah.
And
I
how
mean,
many people do we know who are head and neck trained that are looking for jobs?
yeah, I mean, because I'm gonna put a plug in. I'll be the other shoulder. I don't know if I'm the good side or the bad side. I'll be the pro fellowship side. How's that? Um, because and I think you guys know, but I trained at Oregon as well, and I just had fellows around us. At Oregon they had head and neck fellows, and I found them to be great. Like I learned a lot from hanging out with fellows. I mean, those guys I still get connected with them. They're great individuals. They're smart. I feel like they learned by working with us, and we learned by working with them. And so I was very prone to the idea of fellowship, and I like the idea of jaw surgery and TMJ just because I saw it was a need that was unmet. It was a very oral surgery thing. And so, I'm talking about a number of years ago, but, like in 2010 or 2008, that was kind of the initial VSP thing. So it was kind of a cool thing as that went on. And so I ended up going to fellowship. I was in between going to private practice and then 2 fellowships. I interviewed at Stanford, North Carolina. Stanford was 2 years at the time, and so that made it an easy decision. So I went to North Carolina. I did a year at the Carolina Center for Oral and Facial Surgery with Farrell. And that crew's a big organization now. When I was there, it was a smaller group, but it was still a great group of people and great experience. And man, I wouldn't trade that at all. I think that was a great year. Looking back on it, it was a great decision, but in real time, when I was in your shoes, I found that to be a really hard decision to make. Because I had a kid at that stage. I was um talking about having another kid. I was married. It was very much like a move the family across the country. What am I going to do with all of this information? And I just saw myself as wanting to focus on that. And the year that you get is great training because you learn a ton about all the other stuff like outpatient surgery, anesthesia with it, orthodontic approaches. You can push research, you can push cutting edge. I think the best thing though is networking because you meet and you hang out with people who do a lot of that. And so you meet their friends, you hear about their previous residents, fellows, they're working on this alternative osteotomies chapter. And so anyway, as a fellow, you also connect with other fellows, right? So it's like this cool network of people that you get to interact with and kind of carry the specialty forward. And so if you see yourself doing a reasonable amount of orthognathics,
Yep.
it is worth a year. Because I mean, when I was at Oregon, you got some reasonable training in how to do jaw surgery, but it was normal to have sausage lips and 2-3 day stay in the hospital and PCAs after TMJ replacement.
Oh,
Like
we have those, yeah.
what are you talking about? Not PCAs though, right?
Oh, we've had a PCA.
Oh, Marcus. So yeah, so you get the fellowship and then you see how a lot of the stuff can be outpatient. There's just like tricks and kind of processes to it. And
Mhm.
I think it's one of the better things about orthognathic fellowships is they tend to reimburse a little bit better. So it isn't as terrible as some of the like GME, uh, whatever it is. You'd be a PGY 7, I think, or 8 at some fellowships. And so that's better.
Yeah.
I think it's worth the 12 months because man, I think Wasson's right. I don't think you're going to be out on the street poor. I think, it sounds like your wife's solid, like I don't
Right.
think
So
you worry
I
too much about retirement at this stage.
no, I'm very fortunate to have our careers are doing well, and my wife is very supportive. She even is very supportive of the freedom to consider fellowship, and so props to her. She's been a very good support during residency. The thing I realize the side of me that wants to do a fellowship reasons it by saying, well, you can't just dabble in jaw surgery. Like you can't just dabble in cooking Italian food. You really have to go all in. You have to buy all the ingredients. And when I think about jaw surgery, do if I was a patient, do I want to go to someone who does 5 jaws a year or like 10 jaws a year? Probably not. And so I
Marcus,
think
you're
about
basically reciting Sam and I's websites at this point.
I mean, the Italian food, I kind of got sidetracked on that one. I feel like I don't have the right equipment. We'll have
No,
to talk
yeah.
about that a different time. But yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I
Yeah,
think
you're exactly right.
because like focused education helps you a ton when it comes to
Hmm.
this. Like it's almost a different surgery.
Hmm.
Yep. I feel like there's a tendency for all of us in any profession, and I'd say it's always been prevalent in our profession whenever I talk to people, because the debate when I was in years and years ago was always, and it still is, single versus double degree. There's this tendency for all of us to justify the path that we took, right? And so I don't want that to be our discussion today. And I've told Sam, and I will freely admit, there are frequently times when I wish I had done a fellowship. I would agree from the person who did not do it. I would 100% agree with everything that Sam just said. Had I known this is where I would be right now, similar to Sam, I would have said, oh yeah, this 12 months, let's do it. Let's get it over with. Let's take the benefits that we're going to get from here and utilize them and maximize them. I think the difficulty and the devil's advocate to that is, how confident are you that that's going to be what you're going to do? Now, is there any harm to taking another year? There's not. Like, there's no harm in being better trained. Like, no one's ever going to fault you for that. Like, you're never going to look back and be upset about it. But if we try to extrapolate this discussion beyond your personal situation for the millions listening worldwide, I think there are those factors that we have to consider and that are worth bringing up. Where are you going to practice matters, right? Like if you don't come from, if you're not going to an area where there's a strong jaw surgery presence, or there's 5 very competent jaw surgeons and TMJ surgeons, I don't know that you're going to do a ton to justify it. Or if you're in a lower income area where maybe you're not going to be able to do it for financial reasons for your patient base, I think where you practice matters. I think your experience and exposure matters. But I would agree, if you're fairly confident that you're going to do a lot of jaw and TMJ surgery, take the year and do it. Like, I think it will be well worth it. It's when you're on the fence. And again, I just have friends and colleagues who, were very well trained and did fellowships, and they're not even doing those things now. And so I don't think you want to enter into it cavalierly. And I'm not accusing you of that, because you're clearly well thought out in this regard. But I think those are the things I would tell the listening base at large in residency. Like, how confident are you going to do this? Because everyone's like you now. The past 20 years has been everyone wants to come out and do head and neck. And now we almost maybe have a glut of head and neck providers, and a lot of them are looking for jobs, or they're not doing head and neck. I don't think you'll have that problem in orthognathic and TMJ. I don't know, but things to consider.
I have a question I want to throw at you guys.
Shoot.
Throw away.
So I still can't remember who told me or gave me this quote or this wisdom, I guess, this
Probably.
clinical pearl. Probably, one of you guys, or someone old like you guys. But
Probably.
someone has once told me, treat your residency like a fellowship. Do you guys think that's possible, for one? And then two, can that replace a fellowship?
I don't know. I don't think I gave you that advice. Residency is tough because especially 6-year residency, right? So you match
Yeah.
to a program, and frequently by the time you start practicing oral surgery, it's a different program. It's not always the case, but let's say you get in 3 years later, the senior lady retires, brought in some new faculty, maybe they're doing more trauma, or whatever, more dental alveolar, just a different direction than what you had thought. And really, residency is about learning the basics of surgery. It's learning SAFE, it's learning patient exam, it's decision making, how to behave at the hospital, just just sort out those things, because it is a lot to learn those and get the experience. And for me, at least, like that it was a few years. And so by the time I think you can really kind of get everything you can out of residency, you're kind of stuck to what the residency is doing. When I was a resident, I definitely overworked. Safe and I were like competitive. I don't know if Albustani is ever going to hear this, but him and I would try to operate. We would both compete on who could do the most surgeries. And so we were always working with the idea that we'd learn our stuff. And it's good to get, practice with your hands and exposure to surgery. But I kind of wanted exposure to some other stuff. And I think private practice jaw surgery is what I wasn't getting exposed to. So
Yeah, absolutely. There's just too many limitations to treat it like a fellowship. Too many variables out of your control, right? Like, residency is so much dependent on what walks through the door. Your co-resident who's rotating at the trauma hospital while you're rotating at the other hospital might do 50 orbits, and you might do 5. You can try to get over there for those cases, but who's covering the other hospital? Depending on your residency program, the number of residents, the flexibility that you have, you're kind of at the disposal of the system, as well as the faculty that are there, which can change, as Sam was saying, from the time that you decided to go to that program to the time when it actually starts manifesting to your training. And so I don't know that you could treat it like a fellowship. I think having that perception or attitude of trying to learn each thing that you can at the highest level, I think you should always take that approach, but I don't know how realistic that can be in training.
because I think you can flirt with teaching in fellowship, right? Like you can see how you do with that. I think you can see a different region, you can see different practice patterns. I
But
don't think you
Sam,
can get that in residency. I think getting
um,
some different
how would you
backgrounds is nice.
how would you have done, like, let's just pose this question to, I guess, to you, Marcus, like if you wanted to do more orthognathic surgery cases right now in your program, how would you do it? Or could you do it? You couldn't really, right?
Yeah, it's hard to just get, it's hard to get more cases. There are times where you could essentially volunteer with some of the other private practice surgeons that we have to do more cases. But yeah, it's marginal compared to what you get,
So, yeah, you really
in a
can't
fellowship.
replicate that
Yeah.
and treat it like a fellowship, because
Yeah.
that was, as I was just saying in my circumstance, I would have loved to do more TMJ surgery, but like, how do I do it? Like, I
Hmm.
can't make the faculty be trained in it. I can't make the faculty have an interest in it. I can't grow the faculty practice in that avenue to allow myself to be exposed to those cases. There's just so many limitations.
I
Hmm.
mean, I would also put a plug. I like your story, Wasson, about doing the mini residency. Because once you get out of residency or fellowship, you're still learning, right? Like we're all still learning. We're years into practice. Um, Honestly, literature, techniques, there's some room for refinement. And so still having that, you know, learning view, the adult student kind of every year in practice is still practice. If you have that view, you'll learn a lot. It's really just at what stage do you find yourself? So let's say, Marcus, you join a practice where they're doing a lot of surgery and you go with them to the surgery. You're basically doing a fellowship, whether or not you realize it. You're just an associate, not just, but it's like a different
Hmm.
arrangement, right? If you're
Hmm.
starting your own practice and you want to, be the jaw surgeon of, oh, I don't know, Honolulu. Then and I don't know if there is someone down there or not, but if you just want to hang a shingle and do that, then I think having as much education as possible is going to help you out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are variables. I think, again, going back to where you practice is something you can't ignore. And I've told this to Sam, I don't know if I've said it on the podcast, but when I practiced in Seattle and there was a lot of us doing jaw surgery, and again, Sam had a practice exclusive to jaw and TMJ, and there were other people who were exclusive to to jaw surgery. I will say now, being in Arizona, where I'm the only practice exclusive to these things, the cases I see are drastically different. These things have a way of filtering um, through. So again, like the complexity of things I see now is on a different level.
Yeah, it's crazy, Marcus.
It really is
Mhm.
different. Like you think, why would it be different? Like, but I would send cases to Sam that I could do, but it's again going back to our mantra that we've all kind of expressed of like, if this were me or my kid, I want them to be treated by the person doing this frequently. And also when you're in private practice and you're not doing this stuff exclusively, some of the legwork involved in the details can easily slip through the cracks. Mostly I would send TMJ replacement to Sam because I was fairly comfortable doing other things, but it's like, you got to plan this, you got to orchestrate it with the hospital, you got to deal with the rep, who most of the time he or she is somewhat helpful, but there's a lot of going on. And my clinic's got 17 consultations this afternoon,
Mhm.
and I did 8 sedations this morning, and I've got 10 staff members coming to me all the time. Like, some smoke I want and some smoke I don't, right? And like, it's hard to do those things, and do all of those things at a high level. So, where you practice and who's around you, I would also throw it out there for support. Like sometimes you feel like you're on an island, Sam. I don't know how you feel or have felt in your career, but I have trouble if I have a complication or if I want someone to get a second opinion down here, depending on what it is, I don't know reasonably where to send them sometimes. And that can impact how you practice too. Um, because
Yeah, it's nice having a network of people for sure. I mean, that's why one of the pros of that. The going to a city where there's a lot of the volume happening, it's nice because you can network with the different surgeons and do that sort of thing. But I mean, it's another argument for doing fellowship if you're going to go to a spot where there isn't much coverage for what you
yeah,
need for what you want to do, right? Because I remember, I mean, I finished up fellowship and Dirk's had this bilateral ankylosis case, which to this day is the most ankylosis I've ever treated. And it was like 19 hours or something
oh,
because of ankylosis release and then immediate TMJ reconstruction. I remember the resident presenting it and Bell asking, "Why aren't you doing a Lafort, Sam?" And I'm like, "Dude, why?" So anyway, so we did a Lafort to change the position of the mandible. So I mean, it's like those are tough cases, and when you're out on your own, it's hard. It is.
Mhm.
I mentioned it's a different operation. It's a different operation also doing it on your own or doing it with relatively um, inexperienced assistant. So I think the idea of our podcast actually, or the idea of us like recording our conversations is very much the struggle is trying to practice in the real world and networking, right? So we get out of our islands, we talk about common trouble, and we try to kind of discuss stuff because I'm learning from you, Marcus, from being here. I mean, I think
yeah.
it's a hard spot.
Yeah, I mean, recently I amped up my efforts to increase my social media platform. I won't do a shameless plug here, but uh, as I've been posting a lot of educational content, and I got a lot of attention from international jaw surgeons, and the advices or the lessons I get from them is just so different from the ones I get from the States. I mean, because the whole insurance reimbursements are different, the hospital systems are different, their
Marcus,
techniques are
give me a
different.
nugget. You can't just leave that hanging. I want a little
Oh man.
little education here. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Well,
Give
yeah,
me
yeah.
something that someone told you
So,
recently.
so I mean, not just a nugget, but just a clinical workflow tip that I mean, you and I've talked before, Dr. Bobek, but it seems like in-house VSP and in-house printing of splints, or even sometimes somehow getting your own plates is like a normal thing in some countries. For
Oh
example,
yeah.
Brazil, like a lot of it's in-house. A lot of the surgeries are done like in their office. They don't go to a hospital all the time. Um, I've even tried to dabble in my own VSP. I've used Blender, I've used Mesh Mixer, I've printed my own splints before just with the 3D printer I've had just to mess with. But I mean, the fact that you can do this in other countries pretty easily is pretty phenomenal.
You can do it in America pretty easily.
You can, and even in our residency program, we
Not
tried to
blame.
do it. We had a grant to get a 3D printer and all that stuff, but there's so many limitations to it. Like it has to be FDA approved for us to use in the OR and to
Well,
Well, the printers
as
aren't.
as a trainee, I think it sometimes there's limitations. But I think in prior
because it's no
practice,
different than if you were to make a splint by hand. You know, you're not getting
Right.
it FDA approved.
Yeah, yeah, no, we don't want to get in the weeds too much on it. Yeah, but I think networking because international approach on these things is good to hear from. Like hearing those
Mm-hmm.
guys talk is helpful because you get accustomed to the BS, right? Like to insurance pre-authorization. That world is
Yeah.
insane.
So,
Yeah.
Or
that topic.
whatever things that we do here because of FDA oversight. I mean, not that those are bad. It's just that there's it's good conceptually, at least understanding the worldwide picture.
Mm-hmm.
There's fellowships internationally too. You know that, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the Australia one that I know prior graduates have gone to.
Couple in Canada.
Yeah.
Canadians are lovely humans.
What is your deal with Canada? Why do you hate Canada so much?
I don't hate Canada. I like Canada. It's just,
Your bumper sticker sells otherwise.
no, I mean Dow, I think Graham Cobb opened up one recently. So I feel like there's some good international spots, which I mean, arguably that's even I know a few people that did the Australian one for sure. I think you likely know a few of those people as well. Um, so it'd be another wrinkle, right? Just because they have a 6-month option. So just kind
Mm-hmm.
of an accelerated spot.
What I guess Marcus, because we don't like to let these things drag on too long because most of us have tiny attention spans, but like we don't know what it's like to be you now 15 years removed from your position. So like what other things do you want us to weigh in on or and then at the same time, what else does your generation consider that maybe Sam and I would enjoy or benefit from understanding your perspective better?
I think doing a fellowship in jaw surgery is phenomenal. When I opened up the podcast with the opportunity costs, the thing I always also think about is that is another year of possibly having a regression of your other skills. So dental alveolar, your anesthesia, implant, full arch, whatever it is. And I then think about the graduate fellow. The fellow who graduates still has to pay the bills by doing some of these other procedures, and I do weigh that. I've also heard many residents weigh that too, and I don't know the residents I've talked to recently in my years or under. Everyone thinks about these things of, oh my gosh, well, how am I gonna pay back my loans? With the increasing student debt.
Yeah.
Um, or on the flip side is, oh, I feel like I've gotten enough JAWS during residency so that I can just practice JAWS. Education now is more widely available. There's a lot more free resources online where people teach how to VSP or talk about their clinical experience. And so, I wonder where our profession is headed in terms of one, it's there's already this debate about 4 versus 6-year programs, and what I've noticed this residency interview cycle is that the 6-year programs are less popular now because of the length, the debt, and whatnot. And then add to that the fellowship. I mean, man, if I went to a 4-year program, I would for sure do a fellowship just because the time that I put into it is not as long as my already 6-year fellowship or my residency program. Um,
Yeah, you say that, but when you start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, it's just
Yeah.
like
I don't think that's true.
years.
right.
Yeah, and also you don't have access to all the same fellowships without your MD degree.
True. True.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think my advice is still and just go with your gut. There's probably a feeling of what you think is the right thing to do, and you should do that.
Mhm.
Overthinking it, there's no way you know what's coming in the future, right? Like there's always more information, there's good networking. You can't make a bad decision because man, you're a good guy. You're gonna be a great doc, or you are a great. That sounds a little weird, but you're gonna be a great oral surgeon. If you do orthodontic surgery, you got Wasson to ask some questions on, and so
I'll send all
anything
my
you do to support
complications
your
that
man.
way.
Yeah, tell me about it. I mean, I would agree with Sam. And in your if we're trying to talk about your specific situation, it seems like financially, your spouse support, both financially and just generalized support is there. So for you, I would say if you really have an interest in this stuff and you think you're going to do a lot of it, I think it's don't overthink it. It's a fairly straightforward decision that not everyone has that benefit of. If we're talking about it in general terms, these things are issues that everyone has to decide for themselves. And the persistent issue of training and education costs continuing to increase while reimbursement continues to not follow that trend is a real thing that I'm not sure we'll know the significance of for a little while. But I think it's real. And, I came out with combined, my wife is also a dentist. By the time we opened our Scratch Start practice, we were 1.5 million in debt. I hadn't seen a patient. That's real, and it's maybe more for people these days, and it's scary. Those fears are not irrational, but for you, if that's not your situation, take a year, man. I would do it if you're going to do jaw surgery. I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, the lesson that I'm getting out of this time with you guys is there is no wrong answer. Whatever you decide, justify it, plan for it, and make it work. And if it doesn't work, then you just change directions and make that work. And
Absolutely.
we're in a profession where your plan B is still a phenomenal plan. Like that, we're just so fortunate to be in that kind of profession, which is very rare. So
I would agree, but it's do the year, Marcus.
Nice. All right. Well, yeah. So good discussion. Marcus, appreciate you joining us today. It's good seeing you, man. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, really happy holidays.
Yeah, again, thanks for bringing this interesting topic on. Hopefully it was worthwhile and we old folk didn't ramble too much. Again, it's the Down Fracture podcast for Talking Jaws, Down Fracture podcast at gmail.com. You guys have a good holiday. Thanks for coming on. Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you.